On their final approach, Fable leading them in, and they're off. 3 miles ahead of them for the Racing TV Mares Novices Hurdle. Long run to the first of 12 flights. Fable pursued by Uptown Lady and Just a Whim, with Mrs. Barnes settled on the inside in 4th, and Midnight Legacy, like the leader, winner of a Mares Maiden in Ireland, settled in rear. So Fable leads them into the first left-hander with a 1.5 length advantage over Uptown Lady, with Just a Whim on the outside, Mrs. Barnes burrowing through on the inner, and a couple of lengths behind that trio is Midnight Legacy. As they make their way steadily into the back straight, Fable from Uptown Lady, Mrs. Barnes on the inside, now virtually disputing second, Just a Whim a close 4th, and finally Midnight Legacy, who's just a couple of lengths off the chasing trio as they approach the first flight. Fable leads them into it, pricks her ears as she sees it, measured it well. Uptown Lady and Mrs. Barnes on the inside of Just a Whim, the chasing trio, and 2 or 3 lengths off them is Midnight Legacy as they head on towards flight number 2. Fable, with ears pricked, had a longer look at that flight. Just a Whim jumped second, closed right up on the leader, relegating Uptown Lady and Mrs. Barnes to be 3rd and 4th, and 2 lengths back to Midnight Legacy as they head to flight number 3. It's Fable in the mauve on the inside of Just a Whim, who's right on terms, jumping the 3rd flight. Uptown Lady between runners, a length behind them, with Mrs. Barnes now back in 4th, and finally Midnight Legacy. Into the turn that leads them out of the back straight. Fable by a neck from Just a Whim, with a 1.5 lengths to Uptown Lady on the outside of Mrs. Barnes, and 2 lengths back to the weighted with Midnight Legacy, as Fable leads them into the home straight. On the approach to flight number 4, Fable about a length in front of Just a Whim, with Uptown Lady and Mrs. Barnes disputing 3rd, and finally Midnight Legacy as they reach flight number 4. Fable by 1/2 length. Just a Whim was long there, but she had the scope to get over it fluently. Uptown Lady just over a length back in 3rd, with Mrs. Barnes close up on her inside, and finally Midnight Legacy as they reach flight number 5. Fable from Just a Whim, and then a 1.5 lengths to Uptown Lady and Mrs. Barnes, and finally Midnight Legacy as they reach the 6th. Fable touching down just in front from Just a Whim, with Uptown Lady and Mrs. Barnes continuing to race up sides one another, and just less than 2 lengths back to Midnight Legacy. So they're racing up in front of the stands with a circuit to cover, 6 more obstacles to jump, 3 in the back straight, and Fable and Just a Whim, who's pressed the leader since the 3rd flight of hurdles, are separated by 1/2 length as they exit the home straight, with Mrs. Barnes on the inside of Uptown Lady disputing 3rd. Midnight Legacy yet to pass a rival, but she's travelling powerfully enough as they prepare to level off and race down the back straight. So they're racing to flight number 7. Fable by 3 parts of a length from Just a Whim, and then Mrs. Barnes on the inside of Uptown Lady, little between that pair for 3rd place as they jump the 7th. Fable, Just a Whim, Uptown Lady, Mrs. Barnes, and finally Midnight Legacy, who now just gets a shake of the reins. Heading to the middle flight on the back straight, Fable and Nico de Boinville going over the 8th fluently from Just a Whim, with Uptown Lady now just being bumped along by John Joe Jr. on the outside of Mrs. Barnes. They're closing in on the front 2, however. Midnight Legacy finds herself outpaced, about 6 lengths adrift of the leading quartet, as Fable leads them over the 4th last. Fable from Uptown Lady challenging Just a Whim on the outside for 2nd. Mrs. Barnes a close 4th, and all the while Midnight Legacy's losing ground on the leading quartet. Heading into the turn, and it's still Fable by less than a length. Just a Whim holding on to second and travelling with more purpose than Uptown Lady, who's seriously off the bridle. Mrs. Barnes, who was a bit short of room leaving the back straight, is also becoming outpaced and is ridden, and Fable is going up through the gears as they approach 3 out. She's opened up by 3 lengths over Just a Whim, Uptown Lady, and the hard-ridden Mrs. Barnes is back in 4th. Fable at 3 from home, with Just a Whim and Uptown Lady closing in again, but another good leap from the leader. Fable maintains a length advantage, and she starts to pull clear on the flat once again. Uptown Lady is into a clear second, then Just a Whim and Mrs. Barnes, who's trying to stage a rally as Fable with a 3-length lead jumps 2 out. Uptown Lady bungled it. Mrs. Barnes has now gone off in pursuit. Just a Whim is on the outside. Midnight Legacy was pulled up 3 out as Fable arrives at the final flight of hurdle. She's a good 3 lengths clear. Mrs. Barnes over in second, then Uptown Lady and Just a Whim. They've still got over a furlong on the flat to go, but Fable's advantage over Mrs. Barnes is growing. It's now up to 5 lengths, with Uptown Lady and Just a Whim battling away in 3rd and 4th. Fable, having made all of the running, is staying on stoutly in the closing stages and pushed out to win readily enough. Fable by a fairly wide margin to Mrs. Barnes, Uptown Lady and Just a Whim, the 4 finishers.
Nick Anderson, Nick Woodbonville on the mark with Fable, who wins in the owners group Colours. Well clear from Mrs. Barnes in the end for Richard Phillips and Daniel Heskett. Uptown Lady was third for John Joe Neal Senior and Junior, and Just a Whim 4th, but has shaped really well. Martin Dixon alongside, but it's fairly smooth for the favourite.
Really smooth, yeah, progressive mare, isn't she? She's got a likeable way of going about things, clearly improved for the trip, and you could pick her out as the winner here. At this point, it looks as if it's going to be a completely dominant performance. Briefly, between 3 out and 2 out, you think she's got her work cut out. She's going to have to work a little bit harder. In the end, it does end up being a pretty emphatic win from her, and as I say, she's improved for the trip. She has a good attitude, likeable way of going about things. You'd think that she'll take to chasing further down the line as well, and all things considered, I'd say she's a pretty good prospect. We're probably not going to get too carried away with the form, because Uptown Lady hasn't, I don't think, run up to her mark of 128, and we've got Just a Whim there, who she's run her socks off. She's run easily her best race so far, but the fact that she's right in there with them does give you a sort of little bit of an indication that perhaps the others haven't run right up to their very best form.
And the handicapper said she's 120 filly coming into this, and Uptown Lady's 128.
Yeah, I still think Fable's going to be 130, isn't she? And you know, that right. Sort of rating, beating us 2 previous winners into second and third. You know, I think she'll get, whether she gets that level on the